We know that this silo approach cannot work. We know that the climate and biodiversity crises are deeply interlinked. On the one hand, climate change poses serious threats to nature and to the livelihoods of people who depend on the natural world. It is terrible that climate change hits the most vulnerable people and communities and ecosystems the hardest. On the other hand, the loss of nature is also driving climate change, with nearly 25% of all emissions coming from the agricultural and land sector, in addition to the ecosystem loss and degradation. These two challenges, though, need to be tackled in an integrated and joined-up manner, keeping human well-being at the front. In today's session, we are honored to have with us a very eminent set of speakers and panelists who have worked in this issue from different perspectives throughout their careers and have deepened understanding on it. First, we have Mary Robinson. She is the chair of the Elders, a group of independent global leaders founded by Nelson Mandela, who are working together for peace, justice, human rights, and a sustainable planet. Mary Robinson was also the first woman President of Ireland and a former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She is a passionate advocate for gender equality, women's participation in peace building, human dignity, and climate justice. Ms. Robinson, let me also say that you have been, for me, I'm now Director General of IUCN, but you have been for me an inspiration, a truly inspiration. So please come to the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, greetings, Excellencies, esteemed friends, dear friends on the panel in particular. I'm honored to give this brief keynote, and I'm very warmed by the introduction, because I do speak to you today as Chair of the Elders, as you outlined. Earlier at this COP, at the World Climate Action Summit presidency event, we heard a voice. We heard Maria Jose Andrade Cerda from the Quechua community of Serena in Ecuador say, and I'm quoting her, "Our peoples have learned the importance of observing and respecting Mother Nature, as it is only by doing so that we can build a relationship of reciprocity and mutual care." So, if I were to ask you about your community, what would you describe? Would you think about your family, your neighbors, your friendship circles? Perhaps you'd think of the people living in your village, in your town, or your city. Often, when we think of community, we think of people. Yet this construct is at odds with the kind of relationship of reciprocity Maria was speaking of. What if our community were to include the birds roosting in the trees that surround us, or the river that brings life-giving water? In many indigenous cultures, human beings are not seen as above and apart from nature. Rather, there is an understanding that any divisions between human beings and nature are untenable. We must respect nature because I have learned, slowly but convincingly, we are nature. And I learned it not least from Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim, who will speak to you later. She and other indigenous friends of mine have conveyed on me the full wisdom that we are nature. We are not separate from nature. And I think that's the most important lesson that we can deeply, deeply try to understand. In societies dominated by consumerism, we've come to assign monetary value to the services provided by ecosystems, commodifying nature herself as though she were a product with a price tag. Humans exploit partition and commercial nature for profit in various forms. we frequently overlook the true value of nature. Nature has bestowed gifts upon us for millennia: clean air, pure water, rich biodiversity, and vital ecosystem services. Our failure to respect these gifts has led us down a path of unsustainable practices, including the burning of fossil fuels. We're at a critical point in this COP. What happens here matters for our climate, it matters for people, and it matters for nature. In my role as chair of the elders, I've been repeatedly issuing our call for a full fossil fuel phase-out that is just and equitable, with a just and equitable transition. Some might say I shouldn't talk about this with you, as we're focusing on nature in this session, but I disagree. In a world where we don't limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, biodiversity loss will be part of the terrifying new reality we will be forced to live with. The science tells us rising temperatures are affecting biodiversity, while changing rainfall patterns, extreme weather events, and ocean acidification are putting pressure on species already threatened by other human activities. Nature cannot afford a slow phase down of fossil fuels. Humans cannot afford a slow phase down of fossil fuels either. I firmly believe in the importance of a human-centered approach within the climate-nature nexus. But reflecting on my own journey, I must admit, it took me time, it really did, to fully appreciate the deep interplay between climate, nature, and human beings and human rights. I just want to reflect on probably the key moment when I suddenly did feel I am nature. It was when I was lucky enough to be gifted with a visit to Greenland, a scientific expedition, because I had served for 9 years on the European Climate Foundation, and I had to step down because it's a good foundation with good rules, and it happened that the chair was also stepping down, so we both got this gift of the scientific expedition to Greenland in August 2019. We were lucky, just before COVID. Seems now a long time ago. Our last visit, the day before we left, was to quite a remote area. We took a boat and we stayed in sort of rough enough chalets so that we could wake up in the morning and sit and listen to a very large glacier. And we were told to be on our own, to spread out and sit on rocks, go somewhere. And because I was the elder, I just sat on the nice bench outside where we were. And I remember the sun was shining, and I was feeling the sun, and I hadn't brought any sun lotion because I was in Greenland. Why would I bring sun lotion? And it was actually too hot for me. And then I was listening to the calving of the glacier. And it was like thunder. Boom, boom. And then the rifle shot kind of sounds when little bits fell off. It was really very alarming, moving. And actually, I found myself crying. And I realized I was crying because of what we were doing to nature that we shouldn't be doing. It was wrong. I felt it very deeply. And I know then that I had a moment that Hindou has been coaching me on for quite a long time. We have to actually feel this deeply in our hearts, that this is what we're talking about. We are doing damage to the very ecosystems that sustain us, to the gifts that nature gives us. I firmly believe in the, need to really feel that very deeply. And as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, I wasn't aware of the climate or nature crisis, but I had compartmentalized the issues, aware of their significance, but reassured that other UN sectors were managing the problem, which made me feel my direct involvement wasn't in fact crucial, and that what was happening wasn't relevant to my portfolio, which was, after all, human rights, gender equality, rights of indigenous peoples, rights of people with disabilities. But I didn't connect with climate at that time because we were in silos, which I'm afraid happens in the UN system. It's only after my time as High Commissioner, when I was working at grassroots level in African countries with a small NGO, that the harsh truth actually dawned on me. Climate change was drastically impacting the human rights of those in poverty-stricken and rural areas, particularly affecting women. They not only suffered the immediate effects of climate extremities, but also endured the lasting socioeconomic consequences on their lives and livelihoods. Equally, some of our most diverse ecosystems were under threat and were being protected by people incredibly vulnerable to harm. Protected, I may say, without climate finance, just protected because that is what the local, often indigenous or local grassroots communities knew they must do. And some of them lost their lives as human rights defenders, as defenders of the land and water rights of their communities. At least 177 land and environmental defenders were killed last year for trying to protect the planet. That's one person every other day, according to a report by Global Witness and its partners. And these are ordinary people just trying to protect their homes and their livelihoods, standing up for the health of our planet and respect and solidarity with nature. Often their land is violently seized to produce goods used and consumed across the world every day, from food to mobile phones to jewelry, with attacks driven by destructive industries like mining, logging, and agribusiness. So we need to do far more to protect those who stand up for nature. I'm glad that nature has been highlighted much more at this COP. It's vital that we recognize the interconnectedness of the climate and nature crises. And I want to quote an English poet, because actually we claim him a lot as an Irish poet, because he came to Ireland, he died in Dublin, and often it's the other way around. The English claim our best poets, like Yeats and Seamus Heaney and people like that. Anyway, the poet I want to quote is Gerard Manley Hopkins, and he wrote in his poem, Inversnade, "What would the world be once bereft of wet and of wildness? Let them be left, oh, let them be left, wildness and wet. Long live the weeds and the wildness yet." We stand at a crossroads, a time of reckoning. Will leaders make decisions in the negotiating rooms that provide a livable future for us and for the multitude of other species of plants and animals that we share this planet with, or will we be left bereft? I started this COP actually deeply worried that a good outcome seemed improbable. I'm still quite deeply worried, but I wanted to end this address with a note of hope, and where better to find symbols of hope than in nature herself. In nature, life springs forth in the unlikeliest of places. Plants shoot up from cracks in the pavement, even through ice and fire. We constantly see transformation in the most improbable of places. With resolve and collective will, parties can still transform this COP into a turning point for our planet. So let us get behind our leaders and our countries and ask them to get the highest level of ambition, the highest level of ambition. This is the stocktake COP. This is the make or break COP. This is the COP that could be the death knell of 1.5. So the highest ambition to have clear, meaningful outcomes, including a full fossil fuel phase-out, a just transition for workers and communities, rapidly scaling up finance, tripling renewable energy by 2030, putting in place pathways for adaptation funding. These are the things we want to see in an ambitious package that is all about our future, a livable future for people and planet. I think as chair of the elders, I have to end with that well-known quote of Nelson Mandela. You know that quote. It almost seems impossible until it is done. Happy Human Rights Day, everyone. Thank you.
Well, difficult to take the microphone after Mary Robinson and her inspirational words. Thank you so much. So now we're going to have the panel. I have to say that we have to end this session in at 1:45, and they have told me that they will make signs there when we are close to end the session. So I kindly ask you to be very, very brief so that all have the opportunity to speak. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Hindou Oumarou Ibrahim, President of the Association for Indigenous Women and Peoples of Chad. Hindou.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone. Firstly, we are all dandelions, and Mary helped me to fund the dandelions, so I'm going to quote her. So the specificity about dandelion flowers is the only one who can grow in all the continent. It could be in the glaciers or everywhere, it's the only one. And it is the only one, when you can get it, you have the seed, you do, and it can split everywhere. And we are a women panel here, and we are the dandelions standing up for climate. Thank you, Mary, for taking the seed for us, and we are all seeding to be dandelions. And thank you so much for the invitations. And also, as you said earlier, we are not only part of nature, we are nature. And coming from indigenous communities, it doesn't matter. From the taller giraffe or powerful elephant or very strong lions or the small insect, all of them have the same right to us. So we cannot harm them. We cannot pollute our rivers. We cannot harm any tree or any flowers. We have to take care of each other. And this is the culture and the wisdom that we have, all indigenous peoples around the world. We do not separate nature and peoples, as we do not separate climate and biodiversity. This is maybe at the international level, it is easy to have two conventions, to have two different peoples taking care of it, and sometimes not the same decision, etc. But when you go in the land of a community, you do not have any square meter of the biodiversity, another square meter of climate. Everything is interconnected, and you act for all together to protect it. So if we wanted to make a change, give a chance to our planet to thrive, we wanted to keep 1.5, we must to all protect nature, and nature can protect us. So what we say, and of course what I'm living actually in my community, we do not have a supermarket that you can go and buy your food, or pharmacy where you can buy your medicine. All our food we collected from the nature. When the rain comes, we get our pastures that can give us milk, and we can get our food from there. If the opposite, the rain didn't come, everything dried up, or if the rain comes very heavy and devastating every places, so that means we have the food insecurity. We are all sick, and then of course, conflict between the communities, migration, etc. So our life is linked with the climate. We cannot just go in the street and protest because the food price is increased. So here is our protest place to say our food is increasing the prices. Biodiversity and climate nexus must be a reality, not only in the talks, not only the willingness, but the reality on the implementations. When we talk here about climate change negotiations, we are 2 or maybe 3 days max to finalize. We are still far from the language of the fossil fuel out. And when we say fossil fuel out, because the fossil fuel is damaging the nature. For us, we say you cannot take the blood of the earth. The blood of the earth is taking every single day. So the earth cannot survive. And you cannot think about the solutions, just transitions, without equity and justice. The just transition minerals are coming from high-spot biodiversity, who is the land and the home of indigenous peoples. We need a reglementation for the just transition energy to benefit global north and global south. We cannot just take it again for the same historical responsibility to build electric cars and buildings, and while our peoples do not have clean water to drink. So it's not just if we just go to this reason. So we have to take the just transitions who can be equitable, inclusive, who can respect the nature and protect the nature. We need a human right-based approach because we are talking about peoples. We are not talking about business. We are not using the nature as commodity. We are all wanted to protect the nature, to have a clean air to breathe. Just to go out today is very worse, the air that we are breathing here. And imagine if that continues. We have to get the assurance of the clean water access for everyone, food in the tables for everyone. Doesn't matter country who is wealth, or he is in the war, or who is developing. You are a human being. You can be head of state. You can be the co-president, or you can be Hindu here. You need a meal. You need a water. You need a clean air. So why, as human beings, we do not understand we need the same things? So if we all need that, we have to fight together to protect it. Finally, we cannot do that without giving direct access finance to those who are the guardian of the planet. We do have like a tremendous money commitment around this COP, but it's still commitment. What is the assurance for my grandmother that she's going to get the support that she wants to preserve her nature? But I do have the assurance that my grandmother knows exactly which kind of trees, how the trees can grow, how she can protect it in order to protect the rest of the humanity. So they must think about that, to make the funding adapt to the communities, to give them direct access finance, not only on the commitment. Commitment is not feeding anyone. We still struggling with the 100 billions. So what is going to tell me that the rest of the funding is going to be cash in the tables for the communities? So the financial system must adapt to the peoples, not the peoples adapt to the financial system. So then we can all come together and protect nature and protect peoples. And we do not have time. That's the only thing we have to understand. The next coming 2 days, please, if you are negotiators, if you are just in other organizations, make your voice louder. Indigenous peoples around the world need you. Not we need you for us, we need you for yourself. If you protect the nature, that means we are protecting you, we are protecting the future, and we have to do that all together. And women power together, we can do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Hindou. Let me make a correction. You just said there is 245, not 145, so we are safe. And thank you, Hindou, for your words and of course for your wisdom coming from indigenous peoples. I understand you need to go, so thank you very much.
So much, I apologize.
We then have with us Monica Medina. Monica is from Wildlife Conservation Society. Monica is a friend, but but what is more important, she has been working for nature conservation for many years. She's a lawyer, and she's now the head of WCS, a very prominent organization that is working all over the world with people and nature. So, Monica, from you, we would like to know why is the notion of ecological integrity important in achieving our climate and biodiversity goals?
Thank you so much, Grethel, and it's such an honor to be here. It's really hard to follow those two incredible speakers. They've both been such an inspiration to me, and our friendship has taught me so much, Grethel, so thank you for including me on this panel. It is indeed an honor to be here and to speak up on behalf of nature and biodiversity through the lens that I see it in my new organization, the Wildlife Conservation Society. We have over 4,000 people working all around the world in communities with indigenous peoples and local communities to try to bring nature solutions for both biodiversity loss and for climate. And we see these two crises, as well as a health crisis in the world, as completely interrelated. And, you know, one statistic that has stuck with me is the incredible loss of biodiversity. Over the last 50 years, we've lost 69% of mammal, fish, bird, reptile, and amphibian populations. That's a wake-up call for all of us. So you asked about ecological integrity and why it's so important. Well, at the beginning of Nature Day yesterday, the scientist who led the discussion about the importance of nature really put it well. He said, complex, very well-functioning ecosystems are the best carbon sinks going. They are far better than just tree farms and you know, patches of ecology, so of ecosystems and biodiversity. We need these big, large, well-protected, intact ecosystems, and that's really what has been at the heart of WCS's work for decades now, and we've helped start some of the biggest protected areas in places like Africa or Indonesia or Mesoamerica, Chile, all over the world, because we've long known that this concept of ecological integrity is really important when it comes to health, biodiversity, and holding on to as much of that, and as well as being able to sequester carbon. We know that these ecologically intact areas with high integrity contain more natural species. They provide more of those services that Hindou spoke so eloquently about: water, the ability to grow food, the protection from rainfall and other events that are natural. And they, of course, as I said, store and sequester carbon, and they can better withstand the climate threats that we know are coming, things like stronger storms, harder or longer, deeper droughts. Last year in Montreal, there was another one of these COPs, that one about biodiversity, and the goal was to adopt a global objective of protecting 30% of the planet by 2030. It's now known as 30 by 30. And that's what we here in the nature world have been trying to bring to this COP, is the sense that if we can combine the 30 by 30 goal of the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity COP, and the climate COP together, we will have a powerful double benefit. And in fact, we at WCS worked very hard along with the negotiators at that convention to bring this notion of ecological integrity, these high intact, highly integral systems. And we need that to happen again now here at the COP. The stock take and the global, the declaration that will come out of this COP should not just mention nature in passing. It shouldn't be something that countries sort of put in their national determined contributions as an aside or a nice to have. It's integral to having the kind of climate solutions that we know we need. And here's another 30% number, 30% of what we need to do in mitigation alone in climate can come from nature. So if we don't include nature, we're losing out on a huge source of the solutions for climate. We know that it's also something that unifies the world. Not only is nature so inspiring and so beautiful, and I couldn't really put it any better than Mary Robinson did when you think about the beauty and the wonders of nature, or the sense of a dandelion that can exist on every single continent. What an amazing thing. So we all get, I think, goosebumps, and we're all passionate about nature, and we need to use that as the impetus for us to continue to act to include nature in our climate solutions, but also in everything else that we do. I will end by saying one last thing, because it is Food Day, and I started out my journey here at this COP at an event with the Tanzanian Prime Minister, Dr. Suluhu Hassan, who has started a Cook Stoves initiative that is brilliant. And I'll tell you why. Because again, if we're thinking about food and we're thinking about climate, more than a third of the world relies on biomass fuel for cooking. That means they're burning trees and mangroves and all kinds of nature to cook. Not only that, women and girls are spending hours, 20 hours a week collecting wood. They're spending 200 million hours a day globally, 200 million hours a day globally, women and girls, to collect water so that they can cook. And 1.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide are released every year because of this kind of food consumptive practices, this home energy problem. So on Women's Day, we were encouraged to speak up and use our voices as women leaders. And so I'm here to say, I am going to double down on thinking about how women, food, water, clean home energy, how all of these things are connected, and how if we can provide the kind of solutions that we know communities need, indigenous peoples need, women and girls need. I know that we can change the world. I know that we can end deforestation by 2030. I know that we can conserve 30% of the planet by 2030. And I just hope that the negotiators out there, my friends in the US government and many others that I got to work with in my role in the US government, are really thinking hard about the ways that they need to take nature seriously. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to invest in nature. So thank you very much, Grethel, and I'm just pleased to be here to share my thoughts today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. And indeed, without nature, we're never gonna win this fight. And also without women, we're never gonna win this fight. And I'm so proud that this panel today is starting by the brilliant Mary Robinson, but all of us are here together as women in leadership positions. It is important, and it's different. So let me now introduce Christiane Laibach, member of the executive board of KfW. KfW is a bank committed to improving economic, social, and environmental living conditions across the globe on behalf of the German government. And I have to say that I'm proud that KfW is a good partner of IUCN in many countries around the world, and we work together with the governments, the bank, and many communities around the world. Christiane is an expert in structured and development finance and has led the international financing activities at the bank. So, Christiane, tell us a little bit more about the bank and what the bank, how the bank addressed this idea, and it's not just an idea, this need to work together with the two agendas, biodiversity and climate change. We know that the bank is doing a lot of good around the world, working with many governments and non-governmental organizations. So what is your view on this? Thank you.
No, thank you very much, and thank you very much for all of you to listen here, and thanks to my fellow panelists here. It's very, very interesting insights, and I think it's a very, very lively panel with different, talking about the same subject, but looking at it from different angles. Yeah. And maybe two comments on what has been said before. I think, honestly, I'm always trying, or I am optimistic always in a sense, although sometimes we deviate from a road. But there are a few observations from this COP now I'd like to share with you, which I found actually encouraging. And that is the one that I think it's the first time that biodiversity has much more of a prominence here at the climate COP, and that is new. And I think it is, as already described by others here, very, very important. And the other part is, in quite a few discussions I have been attending and leading on panels, it is that we're getting, I think, to opening up doors that we have to talk more about systematic changes we have to make. We have been in development finance as well, very often been on a project-by-project basis in a lot of countries, which is all good and fine. But I think if we really want to make a change in terms of climate and biodiversity, I think we have to think more in a systematic way, making more changes there. And we have to think, I've been more comprehensive in terms of the stakeholders, yeah. And that's for sure that from the indigenous people in a lot of continents, trying to make their living being very much affected by climate change. But it goes to the commercial banks and commercial operations and enterprises around the globe. And I think only if we all bring that together and maybe overcome sometimes our emotional hurdles in the one or other way that we maybe don't trust each other, but I think that is definitely necessary to really make a change. And I think we, as KfW, you described it, that we are a promotional bank, development bank, I think one of the largest one, bilateral one in the world, and we are kind of in the unique position with our business model that we have different insights on that, because we work a lot with SMEs in Germany, we work a lot with large corporates in Europe and around the globe, but we work on the other side with indigenous people in our development finance, we work with the private sector, and we work with governments. And I think it has been one of my big things I wanted to bring to KfW, and not only to KfW, is that we are in this unique position to really bring all these different angles together, and I think we have to work strongly on that, because I think that might make a difference. Nevertheless, I think biodiversity has been on our hearts for quite some time already. As you described this, I sometimes wonder why the German government is so supportive of that, but maybe it has to do something to do with our German attitude. The forest in Germany is something very, very important. It's somehow in our souls and in our hearts. Maybe that is a driver, I don't know. But anyway, we have a portfolio of 3.7 billion alone just in biodiversity projects around the globe, and we're quite proud of that, but we're really, together with the German government, really want to grow that. And having said that we have the unique position of having different angles in our organization, we are just about to develop a so-called biodiversity roadmap, because I think when you look at biodiversity, it's on the one side promoting biodiversity in where it is really needed, and on the other side you have to look at in our economies how to really integrate thinking of not only thinking but risk factors and impacts on biodiversity in all of our business models. And I think that is more the commercial world, but it has to be we have to be working all together on that as well, because it's two sides of the same equation, and if we don't get that right, I think we will have a problem. So we're working really on a biodiversity roadmap to include that in all our business models. And we are, and I think that is very important, I think international cooperation, it always has been talked about for a long time. Donor coordination has to be improved. It's not a new subject, has been around for 20, 30 years, but I think giving the real challenges and the systematic answers we have to give, it is more needed than ever. On your question, how we deal with really biodiversity projects, indigenous people, local people, yeah, I mean, it is sometimes it's still a challenging way to really, as a financial institution, as a promotion bank, to be able to have direct access, to be able to have direct impact, to have direct relationships with communities. Because in our frameworks of government-to-government assistance, first it's a government-to-government agreement, which is fine. I think that is the governance that is needed. But still, I think we have been working a lot on really how can we really still have the best input, the best relationship, the best cooperation with indigenous communities, local communities, because I think that is key for the future, to find ways, better ways. NGOs are anyway part of our spectrum as well, really to establish that very strong bond which is needed.
Thank you very much. And I truly believe that it is important to have a bank at the table, because now we have to push from different sectors, and to have a bank talking about the link between climate and biodiversity is not that normal. But is very encouraging for many of us. Thank you very much. So now allow me to introduce Dorothy Cheever, Global Head of Sustainability at Unilever. Dorothy is an experienced global food sustainability specialist, very important because today is Food Day, a very important day. And she is also registered dietitian.
Dietitian. So
Dietitian.
It's a nutritionist. Yeah,
Dietitian. Sorry, English is not my language.
That's okay. It's a hard word. Nutritionist, you can say.
Thank you. With a proven history of working in the consumer goods industry and changing behaviors to create positive impact for people and planet. So Dorothy, today is the food day. I was in an event previous to this, and I said that, you know, we all humans, of course, we need the food. We need to eat. So food systems are very, very, very important. But I mean, we won't be able to have, you know, the food systems that we need without nature. You know, without water, without the soil and healthy soil. I mean, so it's so interrelated. But can you share with us a little bit more on how the food and agriculture sectors are being contributors of both climate change and biodiversity targets? Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, happy Food Day, everybody. We finally made it. So we were fighting for it to be the third day, but it ended up being the last day. So I'm happy to see that you're all still here. But since you are all still here, I would like to let you know that as of right now, food and agriculture systems are not in the global stocktake. So if you have a voice, if you have words you can write, if you have words that you can say, please do so as much as you can today and tomorrow, because we are on the brink of having a global stocktake at what we called the COP that had food on the table, and we have great plant-based options even at the COP event itself, which is one of the first, those of you who have been to COP before, and we still don't see it on the global stocktake. Huge, huge milestone of a year. We have 150 countries who have signed on to the declaration around climate adaptation for food. We also have more than 125 companies, including Unilever, of course, who have signed on to the non-state actor declaration around food systems. And still, we don't have it in the global stocktake. It's absolutely outrageous that this is only the third year that food has been on the agenda. Not only do we all live off of food, it also is a major problem to climate, and climate is causing a major problem on food. So it's absolutely crazy that food systems and food system regeneration is not part of the global stocktake and just came on the agenda. So that's where I'll start. Then I'll go on to say that food, unfortunately, is the #1 cause of biodiversity loss. It's also the #1 user of water, and it emits more than 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. It also is our strength to life. It drives culture, it drives health, and when we don't have it, it drives disease, major depression, major unhappiness, and it is caused by major, major inequality. So food is the nexus of many, many, many things. So as you can imagine, as a dietitian working in food systems sustainability and Unilever, we have no easy task on our hands. So I'll start with a hopeful story in saying that I get to go to lots of farms in my job. And at the beginning of September, I got to go in the southern part of Spain to talk to some of our farmers, which I often get the opportunity and honor to do. And as soon as I got there, I got out of the car, and the farmers were signaling for me to come over because they had seen 3 birds in the sky that they had never seen before. And here I come trying to talk to them about how are you monitoring carbon emissions? How are you looking at your water? How's the water irrigation system going? And they're like, Dorothy, look at the birds. And it was the most amazing scene. And what I said to them was, did you hire those birds to come in? And they promised me they didn't. But it was absolutely amazing to see that. They don't have any Wi-Fi on that field, so they absolutely cannot do what we want them to do when it comes to monitoring, reporting, and verifying the programs that we have. I asked them why they came back with the stat when we looked at their impacts, why they were able to come back with the statistic of 173% increase in pollinators, and why they measured that. And they said, we saw loads of bees, so we figured we would talk to your Measure, Report, Verify team to figure out how we measure them. So they found those on the field.
And then I said, what else are you seeing? You know, now that we're here, forget what I wanted to ask you. They said, we have seen at least 33% different types of wildflowers. So they've seen a third more types of wildflowers around the sides of their fields. Now they're planting tomatoes, and they also are much, much, much more proud of the types of tomatoes that they have. And as a result of that, they have asked all the farmers in the whole entire neighborhood, any farmer that they see around, to come and see their farms so that they can brag about what they're doing. And this is a program that Unilever has led for the past few years as a result of climate change on the farm. So the implementation of what we call regenerative agriculture principles, or however you want to define that, they were implemented as a result of extreme drought in southern Spain. It wasn't because we wanted to show off the fancy word of regenerative agriculture, and here we are, Unilever. It was because we weren't getting any tomatoes. And Unilever sells a lot of ketchup, a lot of tomato soup, a lot of spices that have tomatoes in there, and that's a detriment to our business. So as a result of that, we worked with them to implement different practices, cover cropping, drip irrigation system to use less water, in addition to utilizing organic fertilizers. And as a result, we've gotten to what we see on the farm: more birds, more bees, more wildflowers. And this is where the nexus of climate and biodiversity comes together. It comes together on all of our plates, it comes together on all of the fields, and it comes together in all of our lives. There are more than 300,000 edible species, and we eat far less than 1%. And this was the inspiration behind one of my personal favorite projects of my life, which is called the Future 50 Foods. It was a collaboration between Knorr brand, which is Unilever's largest food brand, together with WWF, where we realized that people are eating the same foods over and over again, and we're missing out. We're missing out on flavor, we're missing out on nutrients, nature's missing out on having other plants grown with them. We're losing species after species of rice, of very nutritious grains, very different types of tomatoes, different types of cabbages. And that's because we're not eating them. Supply grows when demand grows, which is why we brought forward the Future 50 Foods, to talk about 50 foods we should eat more of for the health of people and the health of the planet. It's lots of different types of grains and different types of greens and different types of nuts and seeds. It includes lots of different things that you maybe know, like spinach, and soybeans is actually in there. I can explain why, but don't have enough time now, but I will if you have a question on it. And soybeans and quinoa, which you probably know. It also has Bambara ground nuts, which you probably don't know, marama beans, and fonio, which you don't know, which all of us should know, because these are the foods that we are going to have to eat in the future as a result of climate change. And as a result of what we've done so far, which is growing foods in the wrong places, in the wrong ways, in the wrong amounts. So the work that I really champion at Unilever is changing that. So we have a huge ambition. We have a huge ambition to transform 1.5 million hectares of land, oceans, and forests to be regenerated and protected by 2030. A big, huge part of that is implementation of regenerative agriculture principles and practices. And another big part of that, of course, is changing the types of foods that we have in our products and the types of foods that we have on plates. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here. It's great to see biodiversity on the menu, let's say, but also to see it in the programs. I have to tell you that as a dietitian in the past, I don't so much practice as a dietitian. We're known to take a lot of time to tell people what not to eat. Don't eat so much sugar, don't eat so much meat, don't eat so many chips, And the fabulous thing about biodiversity and Future 50 Foods is it's all about more. And that's a really fun thing to talk about, especially in this time of extreme eco-anxiety. It gets us to talk about more birds, more bees, more different colors, just a purple cabbage instead of a green one. And that's a really, really positive narrative. So I'm so delighted to be here today to be part of this positive narrative, and I'd love to continue it as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. And indeed, it is sad not to see, the issue of food and agriculture more visible at this COP, because it is so important if we want to achieve a healthy planet, and if we as humans want to have a good quality of life, well-being. I think that it is essential that we, the ones who work for nature and for people, engage with people like you in Unilever, join forces, and move the agenda a little bit faster than what we're doing now, because it's not fast enough. So thank you very much. And now I come to the probably very exciting part of this event, which is that we have time, imagine, for some questions from the audience. I just will ask you to keep it short, to make a question, and to keep it short so that our brilliant panelists can then reply to your questions. How I'm gonna do it is to take the questions and then go back to the panelists so that we can save some time. So if you have questions, if you can raise your hand. Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Kurt Winter from the Carbon Market Institute in Australia. I've got a question around finance and trying to get the private sector to engage more. In Australia, we've just legislated a nature repair market, which is actually intended to support investment over and above offsetting into projects that restore nature and address biodiversity loss. What do you think is the role of markets in this space, and how can we scale the finance that's needed?
Thank you very much. Yes, I see one other question there.
Thank you. Simi Payne, Rutgers University and IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. How can we bring the ocean into the room?
Yes. Do I see any other hand? Yes, please.
Hi. Thank you so much. Matthias Pitkowitz, EQX Biome in New York. One of the biggest hosts and home to biodiversity is the Amazon rainforest and the Congo Basin. I would be curious, there could be no bigger connection between climate and biodiversity. We cannot live without the Amazon. I'd be curious what each of your organizations is doing to really step up the game on Amazon.
Yes. Any other question? Okay, I don't see more hands. Sorry if I don't see you. You will have to stand up because there is a lot of light here. So, okay, no. So let me go back to our panelists to briefly comment on the questions that you feel more are appropriate for you. So, Monica, let me start with you.
Sure, happy to try and take all three, which are great questions. First, on restoration, that's a wonderful thing that your government's done. In the U.S., there's a similar thing when there's been damage. There's a requirement for natural resources to be restored. And I actually, when I worked in the government, worked a lot on this around the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, where we started to value nature not by penalty. So many barrels of oil equals this many dollars times how many barrels, right? But instead, what does it cost to put nature back to where it was, and how do you compensate the public for the lost use of that nature, which led to a lot of work, I think, in all governments about how to value nature, which is kind of the key question around getting more finance in. I'm going to try and weave all these things together. So that is a huge problem on land. It's easier when it's a unit of something like water that in some places you charge for, but like Israel has a very strict water law, and the water is owned by the public, and if you use a drop, you pay for it. So that means they're much more efficient about the way they use it, whereas in our country, in my country, in the US, water is free in lots of places. So boy, how does that create perverse incentives? So we could put dollar values or monetary values on some of these things, but it does make people worry about commoditizing nature. So we're trying to balance that. The ocean is a perfect place for this kind of work to be happening because it's owned by everyone. It is a shared resource, whether it's within country jurisdictions, then those governments own it. But of course, we've seen the tremendous loss of fish resources. Talk about a connection between food and biodiversity. The ocean is taking 90% of the heat that we're emitting. The excess heat is going right into the ocean and it's destroying ocean ecosystems. So we need to find ways to better value sustainability and blue businesses that are blue, sustainable businesses in the ocean. And we've talked a lot about that here. We at WCS work hard with communities to help make fishing more sustainable because, of course, when that's better, then the ecosystem is better. And also to create marine protected areas, which is a new way of actually protecting the ocean from climate change. And finally, those big lungs of the planet, the Amazon and the Congo Basin, that's where the most intact forests are. That's why we are so wedded to this notion of ecological integrity and why we think they're the most valuable, and yet in some parlance, there's a question about whether a standing huge tree that's storing a lot of carbon is as valuable as those small trees that are sucking up a lot of carbon. And we say yes, but the system is still arguing about that. There's still a lot of noise about big standing trees and how valuable they are. And those governments that have those big standing trees are here insisting that they get their due as a climate mitigation strategy. So, you know, we work in those areas. They're often hard to reach, they're remote, but that's where we're trying our best at WCS to hold on to nature, to keep it intact for now until we can develop those financial systems to actually ensure that they're protected permanently.
Thank you very much, Monica. Dorothy, may I come to you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll speak a little bit about each one as well. I don't know if I can weave it all together as well as Monica did, to be honest. But in relation to the finance and the co-financing strategies, in Unilever, we've really struggled to figure out how do we make sure that we finance this kind of transition well, in addition to tapping into these types of funds for others and for us. So the way that we have done it, and this may be relevant and helpful or not actually, but we have a climate nature fund, which is a ring-fenced amount of fund to be spent within 10 years that has to be utilized for any program that can move us toward nature restoration and decreasing our impact on the climate. And that fund can only be utilized for that. That fund is also utilized to enable us to have a co-funding mechanism, so that when there are funds like the one that you brought up and other types of funds and grants and philanthropy, we're allowed to actually say, you know, we have this kind of ring-fenced fund, and outside of that we can co-invest in other funds so that we can help other landscapes and other areas actually transition to more generation. So that's something that I think a lot more companies are trying to do, because otherwise we don't have a co-financing platform and we're not seen as a co-financing platform. So I am really proud of the work that we've done in Unilever to create that platform so that we are able to kind of utilize the funds external, not always for our supply chain, but beyond, sometimes within our supply shed or within our landscape. So that's something that you could potentially look into as well to really accelerate that fund. In relation to the water and blue foods, I'm a food person, so I'll talk about blue foods. But in a separate role that I have, which is co-founder of the Food for Climate League, we're doing a lot of work on how to communicate about blue foods, how to talk about the benefit of blue foods, and how to also bring them in the room and into the conversation when we talk about food. It isn't very common that seafood or shellfish or foods like this are brought into the conversation, and they're actually extremely better for the climate, and actually eating them is actually better for the ocean than you would possibly imagine. And if you get a chance, do go into the Carrefour store, because there are different scores on the products, and it's done by How Good, which is the largest sustainability database globally, and it's done by them to really show which foods are good, better, best, I believe, and actually some of the blue foods are the best, and you would not think so, but that's a huge way to actually help restore the ocean and to bring it back into those conversations, is that eating some of those foods actually will help promote the ocean and actually help make it be healthier in the end. It's also a huge carbon sink, as many of you know, so we need to tap into how we utilize that. When it comes to Amazon, so many of you may know that Unilever is a huge champion of the Sustainable Palm Oil Roundtable, which is all about moving to no deforestation. We're now at 95% no deforestation with our palm oil, but we need to go beyond that to move into reforestation, which is a big push that we're moving on as we go forward. But even beyond reforestation and having no deforestation, I don't even like to say that, but no deforestation palm oil, we are moving into different types of alternatives. And those alternatives are some ingredients that have been or can be grown in the Amazon, and some of them actually help other plants grow. So that's a big push that we're really looking at. The restoration and the holding on to, I guess, protecting the Amazon is part of that 1.5 million hectares that I just spoke about, and we do have a strategy behind it, which goes along with the biodiversity strategy, which is, of course, Target 18, which we're working toward, and really pushed toward that happening last year in Canada.
Thank you very much. Christiane.
Yeah. Let me start with the Amazon and the Congo, because I think, as described, I think it's really one of the most unique ecosystems and biodiversity systems in the world. Yeah, and in particular, the Amazon Fund is something on our agenda for long times already. German government and ourselves, we are one of the two biggest donors to the so-called Amazon Fund, which is really working all over the Amazon to protect the areas, in particular in cooperation with local communities and the indigenous people there. And I think when you look at the success of it, or sometimes years where it was less successful, I think what you find out pretty quickly is that political will and political framework plays a dominant role. I mean, if you just look back at the last couple of years, since the government Lula is in place again, the depletion rate has already been cut by 40%, so it's 40% less of deforestation in a couple of months than it has been before, and I think that tells us something about the local, the political framework that is really ruling, protecting biodiversity and ecosystem. But besides that, I think it is, as said, I mean, it's very important to work closely with communities, with indigenous people, and it's very important to monitor what's going on. And we have been able to set up a geostatistics system so that we monitor with GPS systems and others the whole Amazon. And what is really interesting, what we're really proud of, if you take certain areas which are very similar, and on the one part there is a project of the Amazon Fund, and on the other part there is not, you really can compare the differences in terms of the cutting rate of the woods, and you really see a significant difference on the areas where there is a project implemented by the Amazon Fund. And I think that is very encouraging, and helps us and supports us to move further ahead. In terms of monitoring, and then I'm coming to the finance part as well, which obviously is one of our major strategic initiatives too, because we all know, I mean, public money is not endless, yeah. And whatever we talk about, that governments are getting involved, public money gets involved, it will be never enough. That's the one part. And the other part, talking earlier about the systematic approach, I think besides the funding, I think it needs private initiative, private investment, private capital to make that really a common target. And so I think there are two reasons why really to work on this private capital mobilization, which are very important for us. But because I started talking about finance with the monitoring, I think you can attract more private investors, be it philanthropic money, be it really investment money, if we're really able to show success and to monitor and to show what you're doing and how successful you can set up projects. Still, quite honestly, I think we have to be honest to ourselves. To attract private capital for pure biodiversity projects is a real challenge, yeah, because it's much easier for infrastructure. You see a project, you have a return, but as we all know, the return on biodiversity, because it's not part of all the internal cost settings, is much more difficult to show. So you have to go new ways. For example, give you another example on nature protection. We have set up about 2 years ago the so-called Legacy Landscapes Fund, which is a quite novel instrument. What is the goal of the Legacy Landscapes Fund? The goal is to support 30 national parks in the world for 30 years with $1 million each a year. Why is that so important? I think we're all taking emotionally when we see pictures from tigers, lions, and whatever that have been saved. But honestly, national parks, what they really need is really support in the operational costs for vehicles, for people, for fuel, or whatever, because governments are sometimes not so, well, there's a stop and go sometimes lacking of funds, not, and the setback, if they are lacking of funds, all the successes you might have had in 2 years are kind of diminished again when you don't have money to take your operational cost. So this fund is doing that, and it's specifically set up to attract private investors. And we have already been able to attract quite a few of them. Our target is really to have a good level of private and public money, and to include public money in that. There again, as I said, it needs to monitor, it needs to show the success, and I think then you can interest much more private investors than at any time. So I think I said that earlier. Some people probably look at it and say, well, private money, is that really the right place for them, and what is their thinking, and so on and so forth. But I think we really should overcome any barriers, emotional barriers we might have in our heads, and really be open and trustful to each other, and develop new instruments to be able to make that happen. Yeah.
Can I jump in, Heidi, and say,
Yes.
as a recipient of some of that legacy landscape funding, first of all, thank you. And second, thank you. And it is hugely impactful, because we aren't thinking about how are we going to make ends meet. We have that extra security. It's not all our funding by any stretch, but it's enough to give us a sense of security around these places. And those places, the same way, the communities that we work with that benefit from that funding, I think feel the support. And it's a unique way in which funding is coming through. Most of the time it comes in big batches, it comes once, and that's it. The 30 years is just mind-changing when it comes to conservation and to working in the field. And the other thing I want to say is that the other way to fund, I think this all the time, is because, thinking about companies like Unilever and how you respond to the public's demand. The public can crowdsource actually the right things by demanding the right products, by only buying the right products, by us labeling things as sustainable timber or sustainable fish or food that is grown with minimum amount of water. I now look for places on the clothing that I buy. How much water have they used? How far did they ship it? That kind of thing. It's really interesting that consumer demand and the use of your consumer power, and that's something everybody who's in the developed world can do, can really crowdsource the right answers if people use that opportunity.
Maybe I can add one other thing. I think what we have all learned being involved in biodiversity projects over the last 10 years. There was a time when it was about, like, we put a fence around a national park and some guards, and then it will work. And we all know that it doesn't, yeah? So you have to include the people that live. And that brings us to another part, including the local communities. They first know how to protect their treasures, and they need to have a chance to make a living. Yeah, that's very explicit. So all nature-based solutions, all which brings them the ability to make a living in a national park or around a national park, is, I think, key really to have a successful protection of these areas. And that brings nature and people that live there very close together in our thinking and our way of doing things.
Thank you. So now it is the time for me to close. It's a burning question. The pressure's on. Yeah, I'll allow for one. That's just that question.
Or should business measure their biodiversity impact?
So we have a measure, reporting, verify framework, which is aligned with the Sustainable Agriculture initiative, and through that we have a variety of different ways that we measure biodiversity. I think the main way is really through soil organic matter, so looking at what's in our soil, and then there's a lot of different ways that we work with technology to figure out what else is going on out there. The reason why I'm kind of giggling is because this is a real emerging area, and when we talk to our farmers about it, they literally talk about how they want to count the birds, but there are satellite mechanisms that we utilize. So we've partnered with NASA to do some satellite mechanisms to be able to count the birds, count the bees, literally look at the seeds and look at the different types of things that they're pollinating to see how many pollinators are out there, and the same way that we do with the wildflowers. So there's two different ways. One is from satellites, and one is from little kind of sensors in the ground.
We're also working at WCS on an ecological integrity index. You know, I was talking about those complex systems. So going beyond even counting the individuals to seeing how...
We don't count individuals.
Well, I know, but you know what I'm saying. You're looking at birds,
Exactly.
and we're looking at the
Yeah.
whole ecosystem, trying to create an ecological integrity index that will look a lot like the Global Poverty Index. So we can tell relatively how these ecosystems are functioning. And that is another way in which we can better assess both how to hold on to what we need to and protect that and make sure we're not hurting those places.
So thank you. Now it's time for me to close this event. Can you imagine with these very passionate women and in this incredible good panel? That will be a challenge. But let me say just a few words of thanks. We have heard from Mary Robinson very inspirational words, and she talked about environmental defenders. I think that is something that we always have to remember, that there are people out there that are putting their life on the table to protect nature, and they're suffering the impact of climate change because, most of these people, they are in developing countries, in countries like mine. And it is a reality. I have met many of them personally. And then I have learned that they have died. So this is something that we have to keep in our minds, that for some people, the commitment and the style of life and everything that they do have to do with nature. And they are willing to put their lives on the line. And I think that is our obligation to care for them. So I was really inspiring, and I hope that you too, by the words of Mary Robinson. And then we had Hindou with her power, no? And really delivering the message of indigenous peoples around the world, and how important it is to hear from them, to learn from them, to take the wisdom on board. Because it's not just any wisdom, it's that they have been living in the forest and in many incredible places in this planet for ages. And not only that, but they are the holders of 80% of the biodiversity of this planet. So it's not just a speech, it's a reality. They are the ones who are out there, and they are the ones who actually have kept the natural resources for all of us. So her words of wisdom were very also important and an inspiration for many of us. And then we had Monica, who is here. Of course, Monica, you can see her, she's very passionate and she's very strong about everything that they do, WCS. It's just fantastic, WCS is an organization that is very committed, that is working in very different corners of this planet with a lot of capacity and science, I should say, Monica. What Monica was saying of the things that they are doing is very important, and what is more important is that they're bringing the discourse of biodiversity and climate change into action, which she already shared with us. Then we had Christiane from the bank, from KfW. And I think it's very important what she said, because it comes from a different angle, a different perspective, and it's something that we need to listen more. I mean, public money is so important, and sometimes for the organizations that work with the support of banks like KfW or with countries, Germany and some others, it is good to understand that the money we are investing come from people, normally come from the taxes that people pay. So it is not just an institution, but it is an entire country and the citizens who are allowing us to use some of these resources for the good of many. And this is incredible, when in IUCN, when we receive support from donors, I always think, is that from where that money is coming? Because we don't have, and any of us have a machine making, money, and then when we want, we make it. So it is so important to understand that in this planet, there is solidarity, and solidarity can come in different shapes and forms. Christiane mentioned something very important about also private capital, and I will add the philanthropic movement. I truly believe that we need everybody on board. It's not just one or the other. We need everybody on board if we are to really, have a good outcome out of all of this. We don't have time for fights. We don't have time for just endless discussions and endless papers. We just need to act. We just need to take action, and that action needs to come from different sources, including private capital. I mean, if that is not happening, then we will lose in, I don't know, more than half of the possibilities. Oh? And Dorothy, it was very good to have you with us, Unilever. I think that, as Monica just mentioned, I mean, the consumer power is incredible. And Unilever is huge. No? Unilever, I think about what do I buy is Unilever, no? Probably. And all of you think what you buy and think about Unilever is Unilever, even if you don't know that it's Unilever. So I think that to have Unilever at the table is important. It's important what they're doing. I know that when we talk about this, we think that there is more than needs to be done. Yes, indeed, there is more than needs to be done, but we need the Unilevers at the table. And I think that is important, and for that, Dorothy, I thank you, and I thank you also for bringing the issue of agriculture and food to the table, because it is relevant. We have to work together. There is no other way. And I also want to refer to some of the questions. Oceans, Oceans is in the room. When we talk about nature, of course, I mean, the ocean is our best ally, not only taking 90% or more than 90% of the heat of this planet, but also, as you know, because you are the expert, not me, dealing with 25 to 30% of the carbon emissions of this planet. So oceans is important, as many of the panelists also said, for our food security too. And we have to treat it with care, and to always have ocean center, because at the end we live in a blue planet. No, it is a blue planet. It's more than 70%, if I'm not mistaken. So we live in this wonderful blue planet. In Congo and the Amazon, I'm just going to say one thing. Congo and the Amazon is indigenous peoples and local communities. It's not just about forest. Forests, those are our biggest, and I can mention also Indonesia, I can mention Selva Maya, I can mention some other, incredible places where, I have had the luxury to be in some of these places, And I have this memory of the Selva Maya. You know, in the Selva Maya is the region that I'm from. You go to these sort of pyramids, Mayan pyramids, and you go to the top, and then you stand up there, and everything you can see until, you know, your eyes cannot see more is forest. It's like looking at the ocean, no? That the ocean, it seems that it has no end. In these places, and I tell you my experience in Selva Maya, I was there like, it's not ending. It's just forest and forest and forest until your eyes cannot see more. And of course, the next question is, can we keep this? Can we keep this? And there is where we come back to indigenous peoples, with local communities, in with the things we need to do to keep our planet intact. I'm gonna finish with something that Mary Robinson started to say, nothing is impossible. No, nothing is impossible. And I will add that nothing is impossible if we work together. We need to work together from different corners. We need to integrate climate change and biodiversity. Everybody is saying it. And of course, this incredible group of women have just shared that with you. We have to come to action. We have to leave the silly discussions on the side, and we have to take action, because nothing is impossible if we work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you, Grethel. Thank you.